John 8:25. Dicebant ergo ei, tu quis es? Dixit eis Iesus, principium qui et loquor vobis. Therefore they were saying to him, Who are you? Jesus said to them, From the beginning, just as I have been saying to you. Now, you may even notice from my somewhat awkward translation of this last clause here, that is, Jesus' response to the question asked of him, there's some interpretive issues going on that we need to talk about here. And we're going to focus all of our attention on this part of the verse, principium quia et loquor vobis. So we can further punctuate this by outlining the question of Jesus's interlocutors like this with some punctuation. So they ask him, who are you then? Because he's just said, you need to believe that I am. They're still not fully understanding, evidently, what he's getting at. So he said to them, and here we probably have an adverbial form. Erasmus says we should take this adverbialiter. That is, we would say in English, adverbially. And I think he's right about that. That's also the consensus of modern scholars about the Greek underlying this phrase, that it means something like from the beginning, which would make it the equivalent of something like principio, which you can use adverbially this way in the ablative case. So from the beginning, and Erasmus also says one better way to interpret this that has been suggested is quod for quia, or quia in the sense of quod. Principium, we might even add id quod et loquor vobis. Erasmus further says, we can add, to help us make sense of this, something like iam dudum, now for a long time. In other words, one way of interpreting this is to say, in answer to their question, who are you? He's saying, I am. So we've got to supply that here. Ego sum, from the context of the previous verse. I am that which now for a long time I've been saying to you from the beginning. Now, this is a really compressed statement, and if you're beginning to squint at this and feel sort of skeptical about these interpretations, don't worry, you're not alone. There was some controversy in the patristic era about how to interpret these verses, in part because the language in the Greek is pretty compressed. And then, of course, as we take the further step of translating it into Latin, there's potentially further opportunities for misunderstanding. And the Latin church fathers on occasion disagreed about how exactly to interpret this verse. But this seems to be the meaning. This is how most English translations make sense of this verse, that Jesus is saying, almost with exasperation, I am just what I have been saying to you from the beginning. Now, loquor here is, of course, a present tense, not a perfect tense. But the idea seems to be that when you use it together with principium, adverbially, you're saying, from the beginning, I'm saying to you, we have to say in English, I have been saying to you all what I am. In other words, they should know and understand from what he has already said, is the sense. Now, Erasmus points out that in both his day and in the early days of the Latin church fathers, there were alternative ways of understanding this verse, which we're not going to get too much into. But if you find all of that a little bit bewildering and a little bit exasperating yourself, like I said, you're in good company historically.